What's up, Flannelverse and Endgamers? We are back for Monday Night Football. We're going to talk through the two-game slate first. Adam and I will start together on the two-game slate, go through position by position as usual: quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends, defense, kickers. Then Adam is going to drop off so he can focus on his lineups. But I will continue and look at the showdown slates after we're done with the main slate. I'll play with some lineup builds, take questions, etc., etc. Kind of the usual format that we do here. But fun to have Adam here closer to lock. Adam and I usually do the morning slate, and then I do it again in the evening. This week just works out better, I think, for us to do the main slate together, and then I'll just break off and do showdown. Adam, how did your Sunday go? How is life?
Life's good. Sunday sucked. Didn't have anything good on any slate. Had a team that would have finished like top 50-ish in the millie, but I late swapped off something like 60 points or something insane. So yeah, nothing interesting on any of those slates. Lost at showdown. Lost at baseball showdown today, but excited for football tonight.
Yeah, me too. I have a love-hate relationship with these two-game slates in that I love them as a player. Like I love having the two different showdown slates, 100,000, 200,000 at first. Like I don't love that the prizes get a little bit smaller in showdown, but I do really enjoy short slates in general. I kind of feel like I'm better at short slates than large slates for NFL. So kind of love-hate, but then as a content creator, it's just a pain in the ass just trying to figure out what to do with these two-game slates.
Yeah, it sucks as far as content creation, just like you said, trying to figure out exactly how to structure everything. I also think that I am much worse at short slates than normal size slates. So I've been just staring at the main slate lobby all day. Like obviously playing a $20 500K at first is fun, but also like I know I'm not very good at this. So why am I doing it?
That's funny because I feel like you've had a lot of success in like afternoon only on Showdown. I feel like there have been several times where you and I have been like competing for that top spot, and I know that you've won it at least a couple of times.
Yeah, I've done like 4 or 5 games. I'm fine. It's really I'm just not very good at dupe sports.
Oh yeah. I mean it's kind of the same thing as showdown as far as dupes, like leave a little salary on the table, get a little weird with construction. Tougher today than it was last week. Last week it was like you could just play whoever you wanted. The salaries are a little bit tighter today, so like leaving salary, you might not want to leave as much. But yeah,
even showdown, like I'm having a good showdown season, and I'm not like playing the egregious, 100 whatever dupe trains, but like my dupes still aren't really where I want them to be in showdown. I went back and looked at how I did on last Monday's 2-gamer, which like I hadn't done any sort of real prep work for it as far as avoiding dupes on a main, like on a classic NFL slate. And like, it was bad. So definitely using more of the showdown stuff today than I did last week, but still kind of curious to see how it ends up working out.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. See how the adjustment goes. By the way, while you guys are coming in, we're again going to go position by position starting in a minute here. But while you're coming, please do like the video, subscribe to both of our channels. We are streaming to both the Flannelverse and Endgame Syndicate today. Would appreciate any of you who have not already subscribed to both channels. Make sure you are subscribed to both because we are both trying to grow small channels. I do have 3,000 is in sight for me. I set the goal for today to get to 3,000 subscribers. Would have been a lot easier if we had done this in the morning, done the 2-show thing. Not as easy with just one show, but still hopeful that I can get to 3,000 subscribers in the Flannelverse by the end of the day today, and then I can set my sights on 5,000 for the end of the season. So if you haven't already subscribed, please do so to both channels. Of course, liking the video, commenting, all of that helps out quite a bit. Now, things aren't always going to go according to plan, like they very much did not for me last night, but we always put in the work. Adam and I are doing all of the research that we can to put us in the best place to potentially have big wins over time. All right, we will start here with quarterbacks. And of course, it's a 2-game slate. We have 4 quarterback options here. Jared Goff is 6,400. He is the most expensive. Does not project the best, actually. Anywhere, the place that I've looked, Jared Goff, not the best projection. Then the ownership a little bit lower, around 22% as a result. Geno Smith, 5,900, has the better projection. Of course, also going to be the chalkiest. 35% projected ownership here on Roto Grinders. Tyler Huntley projected for 25% ownership. He's 5,500. And then Will Levis, 5,200, projecting for 18% ownership. Adam, I'll throw it to you. Do you have a lean on like who's going to be your most owned quarterback? How do you think you're going to play the slate that way?
Yeah, so I haven't built lineups yet, but I'm kind of scared too because I do see how quarterbacks are grading out for me when I just, build lineups in general, but like I guess I should say I haven't selected the lineups that I'd be playing yet, but I have built lineups just to see how they look, and I'm a little concerned because like Geno and Goff are obviously the two quarterbacks that I would like to get to. They're the two quarterbacks that I think the field is going to get to the most, but as a result, I have Huntley and Levis both going quite a bit under-owned here, which doesn't always mean that I end up playing a lot of that quarterback. There's a lot of ways that you can approach slates that you don't have to prioritize, individual player level optimal percentages. But on a 2-game slate, I do think it's probably going to pop up a little bit more for me just because there aren't as many alternatives. And then also you run into the issue of like, when you're playing Goff, like a lot of the field's playing Amon-Ra St. Brown with Goff, and I think he's going a little bit over-owned. And you kind of just like end up going further and further down where like I think I might end up getting away from those lineups that look and feel good. So I'm a little concerned that I'm going to end up with a lot of Levis and what's his
Huntley?
name?
Tyler Huntley.
Yeah, Huntley. I kept wanting to say Skylar Thompson. I knew it wasn't him. And Tyler Huntley and less of Geno and Goff, but also kind of hope that's not the case.
Yeah, so I think this is the good point. I always want to say it at least once per show. Adam and I are not really in the business of predicting what's going to happen. We are in the business of playing the lineups that we think are going to win the most when they win and have a reasonable shot at winning. I don't know if I'm saying that exactly right, but we're trying to play kind of find the spots where we think the field is maybe playing certain players a little bit less than they should, trying to take advantage of the field's mistakes and trying to win money more so than trying to predict the outcomes of the game. So when you say that you think you're going to get to more Will Levis than a higher portion of Will Levis relative to the field, it's not because you are confident that Will Levis is going to be the highest scoring quarterback on the slate. You're not predicting that he's going to be the highest scoring quarterback on the slate, but you think that maybe he has a better odds of being the highest scoring quarterback on the slate or the quarterback that you need in the winning lineup than his ownership would dictate. I'm not being very articulate today, but I think that's generally a good synopsis of what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I think that Will Levis and Tyler Huntley are more likely to be the slate winning quarterback than the field is giving them credit for. And then it creates a situation where even though they are less likely than the quarterbacks the field's going to play, you have less competition at the top when, in those percentages of the time that they do end up being the quarterback that you need because they're lower owned. And then also what I was saying with like Amon-Ra St. Brown, it's not that I think he's a bad player or anything like that, but you end up, because of the way stacking works in the NFL, you end up going further down the line too. It's not just, oh, well, I think this quarterback is underrepresented, because chances are if the field is playing a little bit too much of some quarterbacks, they're also playing too much of their pass catchers. And you just end up like going further and further down that line. Whereas the inverse is true a lot of the times where, for example, if you're playing Will Levis, who I think is going a little bit under-owned here. I also think DeAndre Hopkins is going a little bit under-owned. I think Tyjae Spears is going a little bit under-owned. And so it just ends up, because of stacking, going making it kind of even stronger, even though you are giving up projected points.
Thank you for being a little bit more articulate than I am today. There are days where I feel like I'm like on top of it, like my articulation is good, I'm thinking clearly, and then there are days when I've just been doing content all day and I come in and I'm like frantic and have brain fog, and I'm like, Matt, I just don't think I can say what I'm trying to say here. So I appreciate having you here to help me out with that. Also think, I don't know about you, I tend to get better throughout the show, I think sometimes. Also, so Ricky says, don't see an issue with predicting the outcome, helps with game stacks, in my opinion. I mean, that is like part of what we're doing is we do a lot of research to like kind of get a feel for like, okay, I think that this player has a good shot at, outproducing what his projection is, that kind of stuff. So it's like, it's not a non-factor for us. We are to some extent trying to like predict range of outcomes, but we're just not like trying to set a like, oh, I think this guy's going to have 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like that, we're not in that kind of business.
Right. I was gonna say, like, we're absolutely trying to predict and project range of outcomes. And that's how all of this is determined, essentially, is, I think that if you were to play this slate a million times or whatever, Will Levis is the highest scoring quarterback more often than he's getting credit for. When you say predicting the outcome, it's not, neither of us are looking at this and saying, well, I think the Lions are going to win by 5 because that's what Vegas says. So I'm going to play this slate exactly as if the Lions score 26 points, the Seahawks score 21, and the other two teams score less, because that's how your median projections are created, and that you're using median projections to form your opinions on range of outcomes. So in a way you are, but you're not trying to just build your lineups around the most likely outcome, assuming that the field, the people you're playing against, shares your opinion on the most likely outcome. If I think the most likely outcome is that Will Levis is the highest scoring quarterback, then in that case, because I know everybody disagrees with me, I would just play Will Levis everywhere. Yeah. But that's, not going to be the case, because everybody can look and see that he's not the most likely quarterback, and Jared Goff or Geno Smith are.
Yeah, and that's there are even scenarios where it's like last night I said like I was light on Derrick Henry in Showdown last night, which did not go well for me in the sense that like he smashed. So like I was light on him in the flex spot, but I also said that I loved him as a captain play. He was one of my favorite captain plays on the night. So that's like, well, are you predicting a good game or a bad game for Derrick Henry? I'm not really predicting either, but I'm saying like I think that his odds of absolutely smashing are better than his projected ownership that the field has given him, but also his odds of completely failing are better than the projected ownership that the field was getting to. So
it's more important to pay attention to your payoffs when things go the way that you're playing them, like when they go in your favor, than it is to try and be right as often as you can in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Anyway, enough. Most people here kind of know what we're talking about. I just, because we are trying to grow the channels, and I think we do get like new people to our stuff every day. I want to say that at least once per show. And I'm coming from the perspective of playing the largest field contest. So it's kind of important to get things right from a game theory perspective. I'm not just trying to predict like this is the likeliest outcome. So that is what I'm going to play. I'm trying to take advantage of field mistakes.
And it's also a good caveat on a 2-game slate. Like if there were 15 games on this slate, that's still a factor, but it's a much smaller factor because ownership gets lower across the board. And you can kind of just say, okay, I like this spot, I'm going to play this spot. Whereas now it's just like, all right, how can I maximize my money when random shit happens on a 2-game slate?
Yeah, exactly. My thoughts on the quarterbacks. Huntley. I guess my thoughts on the quarterbacks are going to come more into play actually when we get to the other positions, because what really stands out to me is Tyler Huntley getting the second most projected ownership on the slate, but his pass catchers are not. So maybe we'll want to talk about that more when we actually get to the pass catchers. But I thought that's pretty interesting. 25% projected ownership going to Tyler Huntley, and then you see both of his receivers, Tyreek Hill at 23% here, Jalen Waddle at 22%. It's actually higher than it was like an hour ago. So these they have adjusted a little bit, but still pretty low ownership going there. But yeah, overall, I think Geno Smith makes sense. He's the very clear to me cash game quarterback. Now I guess doesn't have the rushing floor, so I guess you could make an argument for Tyler Huntley if you want to play the rushing game there.
I actually just and this isn't perfect or anything. Huntley is actually showing up as the optimal quarterback most frequently for me.
Oh, is he really? Okay. He was not for me when I was running. You're using Sims though. I'm using an optimizer.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. In the optimizer, I guess. So just like point per dollar, it is Geno Smith, but I guess that would make sense. Huntley has that rushing floor. Often you do want that in cash. But anyway, I think, I'm going to have pretty spread out ownership here. I do think that I'm probably with you where I end up with more of at least Huntley. I don't know about, maybe I get to 20% Levis. I don't really want to go too crazy with my Levis exposure, but I don't know exactly, but I think I probably end up in large field tournaments lighter than the field on Geno Smith, even though again, it's a pretty clear smash spot for Seattle. They have by far the best matchup, but the ownership is just going to condense to Geno Smith. And I think you could pretty easily see the other quarterbacks beating him. Even to me, Jared Goff at 22% ownership is still pretty interesting. I don't know. I think I'm pretty confident I'm going to be a little bit lighter than the field on Geno Smith. I'm not that confident I'm going to be light on Jared Goff. I might be kind of right with the field there, and just
my guess. And again, I've built lineups, but I haven't like selected lineups yet. My guess is Goff ends up being my lowest owned quarterback. I have him with the lowest optimal percentage right now by a pretty wide margin. I have his ownership similar to Huntley behind Smith. So like I have Smith going more over-owned, but also being optimal a lot more often. Goff, I think it's a pricing thing. You don't really get rushing upside there. $6,400 is the most expensive quarterback. You have an expensive receiver to pair him with too, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And like you can get, not playing Goff doesn't mean you can't play St. Brown. you can still play as much St. Brown as you want and just have cheaper quarterbacks. Obviously, St. Brown still correlates with Geno Smith in that game, and then you can use him as a one-off perfectly fine with the cheaper quarterback. So again, take it with a grain of salt because I haven't actually selected lineups yet, but just from looking at the information I have in front of me, I think there's a very good chance that Goff ends up being my lowest owned guy.
Okay. The positive for Goff, Lions are ranked 8th in the NFL in neutral pass rate. The downside is facing the Seahawks, who have allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks, DraftKings fantasy points to quarterbacks so far this year. So not a great matchup so far this year. Also pretty expensive, getting some ownership. Geno Smith, I'm just kind of reading through my notes here real quick since I already wrote it all up before we move on to running backs. Geno Smith, Seahawks are 18th in neutral pass rate, so kind of average there. The Lions have given up 18.1 DraftKings fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, which is the 12th most. That is the best matchup on the slate as far as quarterbacks, just based on the past 3 weeks, which is very small sample size, all facing different offenses. It's not all that meaningful, but so far has been a pretty good spot for quarterbacks against the Lions. Tyler Huntley, I don't think you need to read into what the Dolphins have done with quarterbacks like neutral and pass rate at up to this point, because it's going to vary quarterback to quarterback. So I didn't even look at that, but I looked into Tyler Huntley's past a little bit, and I did think it was kind of interesting, at least worth bringing up, because I remember him smashing a few years ago, and that's kind of in my mind. It's like, oh, Tyler Huntley can smash. So in 2021, started or played almost all the snaps 5 different times in 2021. In those games, averaged 208.4 passing yards per game and 56.8 rushing yards per game. So those numbers kind of stand out to me as, man, he was really good for a short period. He's also over the past 2 years combined started or played a majority of snaps or almost all snaps 6 different times across 2022 and 23. He's just averaged 134 passing yards per game and 29.5 rushing yards per game in those games. So went from like pretty solid option in 2021, and then 2022, 2023, the numbers really fell off for Huntley. But my kind of thought there, and I guess I can say this while we're talking about Huntley, even before we get to the pass catchers, is he's never really had weapons like he has on the Dolphins. Like nobody really has weapons like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devin Achane to throw to. So I am kind of bullish on Huntley, but I don't think it's going to reflect itself as much in my Huntley exposure. Like I like relative to the field, I think I might be slightly overweight to the field on Huntley, because Huntley is actually looking fairly chalky. I think where it's going to reflect for me is I am going to be like double stacking Huntley more than the field. I think is where I end up going different, because I think maybe he does just surprise us. Maybe he's a better passing quarterback when he actually has great weapons with him. What are you seeing as far as your stacks? Can you see like kind of the different types of stacks you're getting with different quarterbacks?
Yeah, I can look at that. And also, like, one other thing I would say with Huntley too, and I don't remember for sure if these were bad matchups or not, but just looking at the games he has started, especially in the stretch that you were referring to, but 4 starts against Pittsburgh, 1 start against Cleveland. So that was 5, divisional games. Generally, I think of Cleveland as being a team that's pretty solid defensively and sucks offensively. Same for Pittsburgh over, that period. So not necessarily the easiest matchups for him when he was struggling. Overall, in those starts, he's exceeded 15 fantasy points or 14 fantasy points once. And that was a game where he scored 36. So there is, some ceiling there, I guess. But obviously the rushing upside and floor is nice on a 2-game slate too. As far as lineups that have him, I should be able to see that, except for I have some sort of setting wrong and I can't figure out what it is immediately. I know what it is. So give me a second.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I think, and then let me see if I have any other notes. Will Levis, Titans rank 2nd in neutral pass rate, which kind of surprised me. The Titans neutral pass rate of 67.1%. They're facing a Dolphins defense though that has given up just 11.4 DraftKings fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, 5th fewest in the league. So far been a pretty tough matchup facing the Dolphins, but pretty promising to see how high that neutral pass rate has been for Will Levis.
Yeah, so I got the Huntley stuff up now. I am primarily stacking him like a pretty good amount in lineups where I have just lineups that I built with Huntley. Yeah, a lot of 2-man stacks, some 3-mans, more 2-mans and 3-mans than 1. A lot of those do include Achane, so it's not just double stacking with Hill and Waddle. But yeah, where I'm getting to Huntley, I'm just getting to Miami.
That's awesome. Are you getting to any solo Huntley? Camera.
Very little. And that probably just has to do with it being a 2-game slate. Like if this were even like a 4-gamer, I think that was more viable just because you would have 3 other games to choose guys from. But here it's like, if I am playing Huntley, why am I necessarily not playing any of Achane, Hill, Waddle, like any of these playmakers?
Yep. Yeah, so that's again, like I'm not predicting it. I don't think Huntley is like smashing with a double stack is like the most likely to be the optimal, but like you can clearly see that it's a possibility. He has these great weapons. He's shown some success in the past, and the field, I don't think he's going to do it a ton. So it doesn't really surprise me to hear that the Sims are kind of giving you a lot of Huntley double stacks. I like to hear that we're kind of going in the same direction there.
And the other thing too, when you talk about who's likely to be the optimal quarterback on this slate, not only is salary a factor, but the competition's a factor too. And this is a slate where 25% of the quarterbacks are named Will Levis. And then the other one, you have a game that is likely to be the high scoring game, but obviously not guaranteed. Neither quarterback runs a lot. It's not like this is a slate where, you're saying, oh, I think Tyler Huntley is going to be the quarterback a relatively high percentage of the time over Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Jaden Daniels or something. Like, it's not exactly a QB friendly slate.
Yeah, that is a really good point. We don't have anybody that's like, oh yeah, he's playing against Lamar Jackson, like so he has to beat out 22 fantasy points. We have a pretty weak slate. Everybody can fail. Any other notes on quarterbacks before we move on to running backs?
No, I think it's pretty wide open at quarterback, but again, I do think I'll get to Huntley a good amount, and I think I'll probably be over the field on Levis and under the field on Goff.
Okay. Running backs, and I'll move over to the running backs tab here. Sorted by ownership here, we have Devin Achane getting 62% ownership. Now, these numbers obviously are going to vary depending on where you are. I'm not sure if your numbers on SaberSim are going to be the same. That's obviously going to affect the amount that you get to of different players. But at Rotogrinders currently, we have Devin Achane at 62% projected ownership, Jahmyr Gibbs second, 47%, Tony Pollard at 40% projected ownership, David Montgomery 32%, Kenneth Walker 26%, Jeff Wilson at 22%. Interesting. Tyjae Spears 16%, Zach Charbonnet under 5%, Jalen Wright 2%. So kind of spread out there, but Achane getting the most at 62%. I guess we got the news that Raheem Mostert is out, so I guess that will bring up the Jeff Wilson ownership. Maybe I should take a look at the bell cow report for the weeks that Mostert has been out here. But Adam, who do you think you're going to get to? I guess start with Achane. How much Achane do you think you're going to get to relative to the field?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to get the Achane a lot. Have him projected for like 55 to 60% ownership right now, and that's the same rate he's showing up as optimal. He's showing up as my most used guy in Tyler Huntley stacks. Even though he's a running back, he's still involved as a pass catcher, and also because of the cheap salary on Huntley, you can also just have that game where like they run the offense through Achane, and then Huntley is still the best quarterback play just because the other quarterbacks don't really do a lot. Huntley's cheap, he runs a little bit, so like you can definitely pair them together, and it doesn't even have to be Huntley hits Achane for a touchdown or anything like that. So that's not another thing you can do with Achane, but I expect to get to him a ton. I don't know if maybe I screwed something up on my other Miami running backs, but I don't have any ownership or like interest in them.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff Wilson, I was kind of surprised to see the amount of ownership going to Jeff Wilson. You're projected for 22%. That might be worth looking elsewhere as well. I kind of want to see if other places look similar, because we look at just the game log. I mean, Raheem Mostert has been out since week 1, and weeks 2 and week 3. Jeff Wilson has 15% snap share and 25% snap share, but then 0 rushes in week 2, just 3 in week 3, and then 2 targets in week 2, 0 in week 3. So hasn't really been involved. Not really sure why we're expecting. I feel like I'm
not seeing him projected for ownership anywhere.
Okay, I did see that Bellman wrote him up. So I did not get a chance to read what his thoughts were on Jeff Wilson, but I guess I'm not really sure why he would be projected for that much. If he were going to be 22%, it would be a very clear stay away for me. I think it is anyway. I don't think I'm planning on getting to Jeff Wilson, but maybe I should pull up. Let me just check the coach speak index, see if there is something that I'm missing there with Jeff Wilson, because he honestly has not been somebody I've given a lot of thought to. Just looking at the past data, I don't think I had seen any.
You bringing him up made me think that I had like screwed something up because he was like so far off the board.
I know, me too. And then I saw that Bellman wrote him up, and then I see that he's getting ownership, and I'm like, am I missing something? And I don't see anything in the coach speak index. Oh, I guess I will say, I know Scott Barrett did tell me this weekend that he thinks that Achane might be hurt. So I guess there is that we could have Achane hurt.
Last time Achane was hurt, he played through a blowout until the very end of the game.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's a reason there that people are. Let me see. Just Googling right now, seeing if there's anything I'm missing here. Yeah, I searched Devin Achane injury. All I'm seeing is week 2. So I'm not sure what's going on there. I have not seen anything on Achane that really makes. I guess you could play Jeff Wilson if you wanted to play the leverage game, but I don't think he's somebody that I'm going to be going to today. All right, enough on Jeff Wilson.
If you're playing like Jeff Wilson or Jalen Wright, like you could also play whoever like the third string running back on the Lions is, and hope that like Montgomery and Gibbs both collide with each other and get hurt.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It kind of seems like a play that like we've had this scenario the past 2 weeks, and he has not really done much. I guess he's playing snaps, but he's just not getting opportunities. So not a priority for me. Sounds like not for you either. So yeah, I guess let's go team by team with the running backs. Maybe that is the easiest way to do this. So let me pull up just the running backs over here a little bit easier. So we have Achane, you like a bit. Mostert now is not ruled out, but I think I've seen the rumors that he's not expected. I think Tom Pelissero put out there that he's not expected to play tonight, in which case Jeff Wilson, the projection will come up a little bit. Do you think you're playing any Miami backs outside of Achane? You're going to play any Jalen War? No, Jalen, who is the Jalen Wright? Yeah, play any Jalen Wright?
No, I don't think so. I'm not seeing Ingold or Wilson or Wright. Again, like if you go that route, it's only, I think, in the 88,000 entry, 500K to first, and you're just saying, okay, what if this running back gets hurt in the first quarter and I can get unowned Jeff Wilson or Jalen Wright, whatever. That's not the approach that I would take or am taking. There are some RB2s on this slate that I think are playable, but I don't think it's the Miami guys. Achane, by the way, for whatever it's worth, also actually showing up as the highest chance of being optimal of any player on this slate for me.
Achane has the highest. Sorry, say that again.
I have Achane with the highest optimal percentage on this slate.
Okay, yeah, that doesn't really surprise me. Seems about right there. All right, enough about the Miami running backs. Sounds like both of us are just probably playing Achane here. Also, not a great spot. Tennessee, pretty tough defense. Actually, let me pull up my notes there on Tennessee's defense. Actually, not the worst. I thought it was better than it is. Giving up 24.3 DraftKings fantasy points per game to running back so far this year, 13th most in the league. So I misspoke. Actually, has been a plus matchup so far this year for running backs. All right, and yeah, Achane looks great. Going to get a lot of volume. Hopefully, benefits from a better quarterback. We'll see. Jahmyr Gibbs. So Detroit, clearly we have Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. I don't think either of us are going to Vaki on this one. We're not playing through the what if they run into each other and get hurt here. I'll pull up the Lions workload in the Belcar report here. Jahmyr Gibbs so far this year, 40 carries, 13 targets. David Montgomery, 51 carries, 8 targets, both getting like RB1 workloads. Like even though there's 2 of them splitting it, both of them are essentially getting elite workloads here. What are you doing with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery?
Yeah, and Montgomery's actually even been involved a little bit in the passing game too. Running routes like 25 to 35% of the time, had a 13% target share last week, which is, his high mark of the season. But both running backs, I think, look pretty good. I think they're both going a little bit over-owned, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Again, you're not necessarily trying to make the actual optimal lineup. I guess more so on a 2-game slate than a bigger slate, but still probably won't need the actual nuts to win. So they both look like, pretty high probability plays here. They're both showing up as optimal about the same percentage of the time. I have them projected about the same. They're about the same price. I do think you could, on the one hand, you could kind of try and tailor like where you're playing Gibbs to lineups that are more reliant on like the Lions game being high scoring and, him being involved as a passing down back, and maybe the Lions are playing from behind or it's just a shootout, and then prioritizing Montgomery in lineups where maybe you don't really have other Lions or Seahawks players. You're heavier on that Miami Tennessee game. So you're hoping that this is more of a grind them out, like Montgomery's getting work game. But even that, on a 2-game slate, I don't think is a huge priority, just because there's enough volatility where you could just have a low scoring game where Gibbs is the only guy on the Lions that scores, or you could have a shootout where Montgomery falls into the end zone 3 times. So, it's not like I'm setting rules or anything, but if you were like hand building a lineup or two and just as a tiebreaker, I think, kind of just look at like, does a high scoring, like pass happy Detroit game benefit or hurt this lineup? And if it's benefit, click Gibbs. And if it's hurt, click Montgomery. But other than that, I think they are very, very similar plays.
Yep, agreed. I got a shout out. Old friend Matthew Bellman in chat says that the Jeff Wilson write up was just for, he was doing a contrarian article. I always struggle with the expert survey when I'm prompted with who's your favorite contrarian play on the slate. I'm always like, give me a percentage. Like I need to be told like under 5%, under 10%, because that's, to me, Bellman there went with the like, okay, under 10%. Who can I look at? I guess he's the best of the group. But then I look at other people and they're putting in people who are like 25% owned as contrarian. I'm like, right. Okay, I guess I can open it up a little bit. Like how galaxy brain do I need to get here?
Right, where it's like, does contrarian mean 2% owned, or does it mean the 5th highest owned running back?
Yeah, exactly. So I appreciate the clarification there from Bellman. I believe that was a thread on Twitter if you wanted to go read Bellman's reasoning there. Okay. Yeah, I think you sort of touched on this, but would you play them together, Gibbs and Montgomery?
I think it's fine. Like, it's not my favorite thing to do, but again, it's a 2-game slate, and it's kind of like we talk about on those showdown slates too. And you just saw yesterday, like, do I want to play Derrick Henry and Justice Hill together? No, it doesn't really make sense, but it's also one game and weird stuff can happen, like did in that game and, can in this game. It's not like it's far-fetched for David Montgomery to score twice from the 5 and then Jared Goff to catch like a wheel route for a 30-yard touchdown. It's entirely possible. So yeah, I think that they are fine together, even factoring that correlation in the lineups I built that have David Montgomery, like 14% of them also had Jahmyr Gibbs. So, that's behind Achane, it's behind Pollard, it's behind Walker, as far as guys that are being paired with Montgomery at running back, but it's still a pretty decent sized number.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm willing to play them together. Other notes here before we move on. I just had it pulled up. Lions offensive line is going to be without Frank Ragnow, one of the best centers in the league. So it's been really elite offensive line. Hard to know exactly how much this is going to affect it, but worth noting, Frank Ragnow is out, should affect the offensive line strength, at least to some extent for the Lions. The Seahawks have given up 19.2 DraftKings fantasy points per game to the running back position, which is the 8th fewest in the league. So kind of a tough matchup. Now we have Frank Ragnow. So some kind of things hurting the Lions here in addition to being a split backfield, but again, it's a split backfield where both get elite workloads. I think I'm with you. You could play them together. Like if I'm hand building, probably prefer not to because they're expensive enough that it's a little bit tough. But also it's going to be super contrarian. Like that is one of those things where it's like, yeah, if I'm predicting, are these two going to hit together? Probably not all that often. But if you're playing against the field where not many people are going to play them together, then suddenly becomes a more interesting, like, well, you can kind of see it. So like if it's 5% likely to happen and 1% is playing it, then sure, I like that.
The other thing that's nice, and this is kind of true in the Tennessee backfield too, while it's, two running backs that obviously aren't going to be touching the ball at the same time, they do kind of have different roles and both very like clear jobs. It's not like Gibbs is the backup to Montgomery or vice versa. They're both going to get their touches. They're both going to get their opportunities. It's the same thing with Pollard and Spears, where, Spears is not that Pollard can't catch passes or doesn't catch passes, but, Spears is somebody that they use as, he's really good as a pass catching back. He's going to be on the field, even if it's less than Pollard. So those are guys, like situations like that, you can play them together on a 2-game slate. Whereas, for example, the Miami backfield where Achane is doing everything, he's handling, the vast majority of the carries, he's getting the bulk of the receiving work, and his backups are just out there to stand on the field when he's on the sideline getting a breather, it's a lot harder to play those guys together. And that becomes more of a situation where it's like, I either want the backup or I want the starter, and I don't really want them at the same time.
Okay. Yep. Good note there. I think that's perfect analysis. Like this is not a spot. I mean, on a showdown slate, I will still do it. I'm texting with Bellman, who thought I was blasting him, but no, he was joking. Okay. Yeah, like on a showdown slate, I will still do it sometimes anyway, where it's like, okay, you can see it happening where it's like, okay, the starter is awesome through 3/4, and then the backup scores a one-off touchdown, that kind of stuff. But like on a 2-game slate, yeah, definitely prefer it where it is they both have actual roles throughout the game, as opposed to like this is the direct backup to this other running back.
Yeah, and showdown you have like pricing incentives too. Whereas like taking this slate again, for example, like if I have Achane and I need a sub 5K running back, I would just like be infinitely more likely to play Tyjae Spears at 4,900 than a direct backup to Achane. Whereas on a single game slate, you don't have that other game to grab from.
Yep. I'm realizing we have about 20 minutes left of Adams, so we will. I'll try to pick up the pace a little bit here. But I tend to be. I think you and I tend to be pretty thorough, and we usually go over. But since we are close to a lot,
I mean, I said 6 with a little bit of a buffer too, because I know how this goes.
yeah. With us, it can go a little long sometimes. Tennessee, we've got Tony Pollard, we have Tyjae Spears. This is one of the better matchups on the slate for running backs against Miami. And Pollard is 6,000. Tyjae Spears pretty cheap. What is your level of interest in either or both of Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears?
Yeah, definitely interested in both guys. So whereas I had said, I like Montgomery, I like Gibbs, but I think they're going pretty over-owned, at least at the like 40 to 45% ownership projections I have right now. I have Pollard projected around 40 to 45%, but showing up optimally around 40%. So like for me, I think Pollard's ownership is a lot more efficient than the Lions running back ownership is, which makes me think that it's likely I just get the Pollard more. Similarly to Achane, where I think the ownership's like correct on him. And then for Tyjae Spears also, I think he's actually going a little bit under-owned at like 15, 16%. He obviously can play a big role as a pass catcher. Now the problem for him is that Pollard can also, Pollard running routes 54+% of the time each of the last 2 weeks. Spears actually only ran routes 27, 28% of the time. So you've seen Pollard like cutting into that workload a bit, but at the very least, a high percentage of Spears touches should be via reception, which is nice. And then also he's really cheap. So the fact that he's 4,900 and then pretty much every other playable running back on this slate is at least 6K makes Spears interesting, even though I do have concerns about Pollard kind of just separating in the backfield.
Yep, agreed. And yeah, I'm just refreshing here to see if anything's changing with Jeff Wilson, because I do think this is probably just wrong. Pollard at 40%, Spears at 16% on Roto Grinders. I'm with you. I like both of them quite a bit, actually. This is, as I said, the Dolphins have given up the 4th most DraftKings fantasy points to running backs per game so far this year. So far has been a very good spot for running backs. And the ownership feels pretty reasonable to me, with Pollard being 40%, has been somewhat of a bell cow so far this year. Has handled 39 of 51 running back carries, which I guess is just 13 carries per game. Is not that awesome, but adds 13 targets on 49.7% route participation. It's a really nice role for Tony Pollard. 6,000 is pretty nice. And he's actually looked really good this year, relative to last year. So I do have a lot of interest in Tony Pollard, but I also have some interest in Tyjae Spears. Just 12 carries so far this year, but adds 10 targets, 35.9% route participation. And this could be, I'm always hopeful for these spots where it's like, well, what if they're just able to run really well? Why not just use both of their running backs instead of like just giving Tony Pollard a bigger role? Like we'll expand the pie, and maybe more of that goes to Tyjae Spears, and they both can get there. So I'll play both of them together. Is that something you're seeing much of in your sims?
I probably, but let me double check. But I do agree with your point there, because I think that's a really good point, like nuanced point. But if they are running well, you can still have Pollard dominate the workload from a percentage standpoint. But if they just say, okay, we're taking the ball out of Will Levis's hands, we don't need him to throw in this game, we're going to run more, you just end up with more carries for Spears, even if the percentage doesn't change. So that's, another way that he can get there. In the lineups where Pollard is in them, Spears is showing up in like 11%.
Okay. So that is a fair amount there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Pretty similar to the Montgomery Gibbs piece.
Yep. Exactly.
If I had to choose, like play Pollard plus Spears or play Montgomery plus Gibbs, I think it's close, because Gibbs whoever you want to call the RB2 in Detroit has a bigger role than Tyjae Spears, but also the salaries are a couple thousand, like $1,000 to $2,000 less combined for the Tennessee guys.
Yep. Yeah, agreed. I think both are very much in play. I think I'm probably going to be more inclined to play both Tennessee running backs together, but that's also because I really like leaning into the Miami side of the game. So it kind of works from a, what if this entire game goes off? Of course, both the running backs together maybe isn't the best for a Miami onslaught because they could just really slow down the game. I don't know, but I think in general, I'm more inclined to play the Tennessee guys, but I'm with you. It's definitely close there. All right. And then the Seattle part is pretty interesting. We have Kenneth Walker has been out the past couple of weeks, so it's been the Zach Charbonnet show. Kenneth Walker coming back tonight. Really unclear to what extent he is going to get back to his old role. The quote, and I'll pull up the Coach Speak Index here. Head coach Mike McDonald said on the backfield, now that Kenneth Walker is back, it's kind of the duo that you've had all offseason and how you've envisioned our offense operating. We're kind of back to business as usual that we've had before the last couple of weeks. So that would kind of indicate that, maybe they're ready to go back to their week one usage, but I'm not sure if we can count on that. How are you feeling about Zach Charbonnet or Kenneth Walker, Adam?
Yeah, obviously concerning. Not concerning, but like there's volatility here in exactly how they handle this. Coaches can say whatever they want, and generally, or a lot of times, they do something totally different. So, I think Kenneth Walker is the guy that absolutely the guy I would go to first between him and Charbonnet. I think he looks fine here. He's getting 38% ownership. He's only 6,300. We saw him, really dominate touches in week one, getting like 60% of the rushing share. I think expecting less than that here is very reasonable, but at 6,300, that's still like a really good price tag. Also, I think that having Walker back could make the Seahawks a little bit more run heavy than they have been the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
We know coming into the season, they had said that was their plan. It doesn't necessarily have to be. They have good receivers. They have a good quarterback. But we still don't have an answer for how much of them throwing the last couple of weeks was because Kenneth Walker was out.
Yeah.
So that could be, you were saying a bigger pie where even if the split is closer between Walker and Charbonnet, there's just more carries to go around. So I think I do like Walker here. I am, just a little bit concerned. We don't know what this workload is going to look like. And this is a spot where you do, I think, want to think, the whole industry is projecting Kenneth Walker the same way, where he's clearly the number one running back, just like he was in week one. And so he's going to be 35, 40% owned. And what happens if you just do dial back Kenneth Walker a little bit, bump up Zach Charbonnet a little bit? I don't think it would take a lot for you to just kind of not want either guy and just wish you had more of the Lions running backs and Achane and Pollard. So that's my concern. But I think the most likely case here is that Walker is just, the number one running back. He's 6,300. He looks pretty good. Similar, I think, to the Detroit running backs for me. I do like Pollard more than him. I do like Achane more than him.
Same boat. So I think you said 38% ownership going to Kenneth Walker there. Maybe I misheard you, but RotoGrinders says as Kenneth Walker at 26% and Zach Charbonnet at just under 5%. What are you seeing as far as ownership numbers?
Sub 5% on Charbonnet and then 35 to 40 on Walker.
Okay, and I wonder if the Jeff Wilson thing there is affecting things a little bit. But yeah, I think at this number at 26%, I like Kenneth Walker a little bit better than 38%. But I think he's a solid play. How do you feel about Zach Charbonnet at sub 5% ownership?
I'm not going to have it. I don't think. I can see it. Like, I don't think I'm going to have it because I don't think I can project him for a big enough workload. Like, you would, at that price, you would have to project him to be the number one and Walker to just be out there like getting his legs back, which could happen, but clearly isn't how I'm going to project it. I am scared looking at it just because on a 2-game slate, you're going to feel like an absolute idiot if Charbonnet is just the first running back out there today, and you could have had him at, sub 5% ownership, or even if they like use him around the goal line, like if it's a true 50-50 split and Charbonnet gets goal line work, so it's not like it's a crazy, you don't have to go that far, into your imagination to like picture where Charbonnet is at least the guy that you would rather have than Walker at like 1/10 the ownership. I also just don't think I'm going to be able to project him high enough that I end up getting it.
Yep. And it was also just pointed out in chat that Detroit is awesome against running backs. 8.8 DraftKings fantasy points allowed to the running back position per game so far this year. 8.8 total points to the entire position, not just like to the top running back. Best in the league against running backs so far this year, which does make it tough. I do think, I also think, so I guess that would be, to me, I think I could see Kenneth Walker excelling against a great run defense easier than Zach Charbonnet. Like you can just see Kenneth Walker busting off a 60-yard run and being awesome, even in the worst possible matchup where it's sort of tougher for me to envision that for Zach Charbonnet. But I mean, you kind of laid out exactly what I was thinking. Like, yeah, I can envision Zach Charbonnet being that guy and feeling like an idiot for not playing unknown Zach Charbonnet. But the price tag isn't low enough that I think I'm going to get there on Charbonnet. There are just better RB2s who are cheaper, in my opinion.
Yeah, eighth fewest adjusted yards per carry, or yards before contact rather, for the Lions defense using the fantasy points data.
Yeah.
So yeah, they've been good, and yeah, I mean I think Charbonnet is completely defensible in like the 500K to first tournament. Is he going to be like truly split carries with Walker more than like 5% of the time? Probably, but like that's not even the exact right way you should look at it, because then you still have to luck into the game where like he has the bigger workload than you're expecting, and then he also has to still beat Montgomery and Gibbs and Pollard and Spears, like all these other guys. So it's still like a really low probability play, but you can at least envision it happening. I'd be more interested if you were like 5,400 or something.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Defensible in like the largest field contest, probably not really something to even consider anywhere else.
Yeah, and also neither of those running backs really catch passes often.
Yeah, so a lot of knocks against them. Let's move on and talk about wide receivers, and I feel like we should maybe not even bother. I guess we could still go team by team. We'll just try and do it really quickly, and rather than looking at the ownership and stuff here, I will just pull up the data suite and we can take a look at some of those numbers quickly on each team. And we can start with Detroit. So it's pretty clear, like Amon-Ra St. Brown leading the team in route participation, 32 targets. He has the most targets on the entire slate. Also going to get massive ownership, projected for 64% ownership. How do you feel about 64% ownership on Amon-Ra St. Brown?
I think it's a little high, but I think it's fine. Like I have him as the second best play on the slate behind Achane as far as optimal percentage goes. You can obviously get to him with or without Goff, with or without other parts of the Lions, especially full PPR. Also, just such a monster there. So I like Amon-Ra St. Brown a lot, even if I do think he's going a little bit overowned.
Yeah, it's a really tough matchup. So I'll say that the Seahawks have allowed just 19.2 DraftKings fantasy points per game to wide receivers on the season, fewest in the league. So really tough matchup from that standpoint. You look at their like the PFF grades; they have two of the top cover cornerbacks in the NFL. So it is a tough spot for Amon-Ra St. Brown. But it is just the targets, the 32 targets through 3 games. You would expect those to be really strong. I think I end up a little bit light relative to the field on Amon-Ra St. Brown. So are you getting to where the field is like 65% or higher, even with the field being super high?
So he shows up as optimal like 55% of the time for me. So he's not that far behind projected ownership.
Right. Okay. Yep. That seems about right to me. I mean, that he just has such a massive workload. Outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, second on the team, 87% route participation. Second on the team, 23 targets. How much interest do you have in JMO? And I should mention the ownership, 32% projected ownership here. Yeah,
so right around the field there. He's showing up like 33% of the time for me. Fields at 30 to 35%. I think he looks good. 5,600 is just a good price tag for somebody that is a really good receiver. He's getting open, hasn't consistently had big games yet. Some of that has been Goff just missing open throws, which obviously could happen again today. But just from a price to like ceiling standpoint, Williams looks really good to me. Obviously, he also works like in lineups where you can't afford St. Brown. Williams makes sense where it's just like, what if he's the guy today? Not to say that you can't play them together. Obviously, you can.
On a 2-game slate, yeah, you absolutely can. But yeah, I mean, just makes sense as a leverage play on a super chalky Jameson Williams as well. I think those are the only 2 receivers that I'm playing from Detroit. Are you getting to any Khalif Raymond or Tim Patrick? Anybody else on Detroit?
Not worth mentioning.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
very small amounts of Patrick and Raymond.
It's one of the things that I often do, like seek out those kind of third string wide receivers on 2 game slates to get 2 more of, but I don't really think that I'm going to on this one. I probably just let it go. Probably don't get to much of any. Let me just see if anybody's getting any kind of ownership here. Tim Patrick, yeah, projected for 2% ownership. If he scores, Khalif Raymond also projected for sub 2% ownership. If one of them scores a long touchdown, similar to Showdown, it's like maybe you'll want them, but I don't even know that you necessarily would. Like, it's less likely that you would need them on a 2 game slate, and just not 4 targets on the season for Khalif Raymond, 5 for Tim Patrick. Just they're not going to get much in terms of PPR, so it would really need to be like a long touchdown for it to pan out. So don't think I'm getting there.
If I go to one, I'd want to go to Tim Patrick. He's the one that is clearly working his way into more routes, whereas Raymond, they had said before the season they didn't want him to be the wide receiver 3. They value him on special teams. And then you have Patrick that they signed, end of the offseason, end of preseason. Didn't run any routes week 1. I assume he just wasn't active. 36% route participation week 2, 46% last week, whereas Raymond has gone 64% to 38% to 15%. So Patrick, I think, is going to be on the field more. What that turns into, who knows?
Yep. All right, enough about Detroit. What about, I guess we maybe should have done the other game first, since it is the earlier, but these are the chalkier guys. Let's go to Seattle next. DK Metcalf, the second best projection on the slate. Let me pull up the Seahawks in the data suite. So we have DK Metcalf leads the team, 87.6% route participation, leads the team with 23 targets. JSN, 84.1% route participation, 21 targets is second. Almost all those targets came in week 2. In between 2 games, we got like 2 and 3 targets in weeks 1 and 3. Tyler Lockett, 72.6% route participation, 15 targets, had the bigger game last week. To me, I'm not playing any other receivers on Seattle. But we have, in terms of ownership, DK Metcalf coming in at 41%, Tyler Lockett at 42%, JSN at 36%. So kind of condensed ownership there. Again, this is the best spot on the slate for receivers in terms of matchup. What is your level of interest in these Seahawks receivers?
Yeah, they all look pretty similar to me. JSN is showing up most often, but they're all showing up like 40 to 50% as far as optimal percentage. JSN at 5,500, good price tag there. I like the 5K price tag on Lockett. What'd you say the ownership was on Metcalf? Because I have it at like 57%, which I think is a little bit too high. But
41% here.
Yeah, I'll say 41 is like exactly where I think he should be. So overall, I think that the wide receivers on Seattle just look good. Again, I guess the concern is they have 2 running backs now. What if they just run the ball more? But also no guarantee that they have that option. And you do have them indoors here too, which is nice. So I like all 3 wide receivers. I think the pricing on all 3 is pretty good.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with any of them. I will say, I kind of think in a lineup that doesn't have Geno Smith, this might be one where I would be less inclined to play 2 of them in the same lineup. I don't know. I don't usually I don't like to set rules like that. Probably not going to set a rule here. I was just kind of thinking like they're all so chalky, and if multiple of them hit, probably Geno gets there. I don't know. Probably not a rule I need to set, but
I was going to say I think the logic there, and I wouldn't set the rule because it's a 2-gamer, but I think the logic there would be that this isn't necessarily a spot where you look at any of these guys and expect them to put up a big game just on receptions. Like they probably need to get in the end zone.
Yep.
Just, because of the way their offense is, the fact that they have Walker and Charbonnet, and, Geno is also cheap. So, if you get like a slate breaking game from 2 of these guys, it's probably not because they caught like 10 and 8 passes for 100 yards each with no touchdowns.
Yeah, exactly. The knock against it. So I had the same logic yesterday, and it worked out well with George Pickens and Justin Fields. I basically said, I don't think I would play George Pickens without Justin Fields, but that was partially also because he's cheap, but also has the rushing floor where he's going to Fields is going to get at least 4 fantasy points on the ground, potentially more. So it's like really hard to envision George Pickens smashing because he's also not like a PPR monster similar to these Seattle guys without Justin Fields also getting there. But you take away the running aspect with Geno Smith, it becomes hazier where maybe it's more okay to play multiple of them without the quarterback. But yeah, still something worth thinking about for if you're like hand building.
Yeah. And I mean, I think like it's a 2-game slate, so it's definitely okay to play the 2 of them. But also going back to the just layout of the quarterback position on this slate, if like Metcalf and JSN both have like must-have games, it's so unlikely that Will Levis or Tyler Huntley is outscoring Geno Smith.
Yep, absolutely. Good point. Good point. And nobody outside the big three for Seattle, I assume?
No, I don't think I had a single other.
I would be surprised if you did. All right, the other game, and we talked about it. I have a lot of interest in the Miami guys. Actually, I should pull up the ownership over here. We have Tyreek Hill projected for 23% ownership, Jalen Waddle at 22%. And when I say the Miami guys, I mean just those two of the receivers. I don't think I'm getting to any others. Let me look real quick here. Yeah, Hill, Waddle. Yeah, I don't think I'm getting any Braxton Berrios or anybody else. I kind of like the idea of doing the stack even with both of them sometimes. How much are you getting to of the Dolphins receivers?
Yeah, so I think that where did he go? Oh, I my eyes jumped on ownership for Hill. Like Hill, I've projected 20 to 25% ownership. I think that's around where he should be. Obviously, having Huntley throw to him is probably better than Skylar Thompson, but also worse than Tua. I do like that you've just had, an additional week for Miami to figure out how to get Hill involved. So I think, that is a benefit. 7,900 is a pretty expensive price tag, especially when you also consider that Achan's north of 7K and that I do prefer Achan because of his position. But yeah, like Hill, I think still looks good. Waddle showing up a bit more for me because he is $2,100 less expensive. So, he's not Tyreek Hill, but you do still have a very good receiver there. Tennessee also, where'd they go? Has played a lot of man this year so far, which is good for Hill if they continue doing that. Don't know if they will, but 35% man coverage so far this year is top 10 in the league.
Yep. So you are I guess relative to ownership, maybe you already answered this, so apologies if I wasn't listening, but relative to ownership, do you think you're going to be above 23% on Hill?
I would guess yes, because so him and Waddle both, for me, their optimal percentages are coming in around the field, but also I know that I think Huntley's going under-owned, so I assume that Huntley just ends up dragging up Waddle and Hill.
Yeah, and I like these numbers on Hill and Waddle. I think it is going to be one of my the spots that I lean into. It's kind of a tough slate to find spots to lean into, and Hill is also expensive. But I think I'm just going to lean into but he's Tyreek Hill, like he's Tyreek Hill, and we knew that Skylar Thompson was bad. I don't think I know that Snoop Huntley can't be good. Like we've seen him at times be good in the past and without really good weapons in the past. So I think it's one of those that probably the logic is, I think the logic is good, but also I'm not all that confident that it works out all that often. But I am going to lean into, I think, all of Hill, Waddle, and Huntley. But I'll play some Hill and Waddle without Huntley as well. I think that it's going to be probably my biggest stand on the slate is going to be being overweight on the Miami guys, just betting on the talent and Huntley being good enough.
Yeah, I kind of hope that ownership projections on Huntley come up, because if they don't, he's going to end up just pulling up between him and Achan. It's just going to be like, oh, well, you may as well play Waddle and you may as well play Hill, and I'm going to have so much Miami.
Yep, exactly. That's kind of where I'm going too. And again, it's not because I'm like, oh, I think this is going to happen. It's more just like, well, the field isn't playing it at all, and I can definitely see it happening, and I think it's more likely than the field.
Yeah, going back to the conversation at the beginning, it's just I think it's more likely that the Lions passing game and the Seahawks passing game does well than the Miami passing game. But every single person in chat, I'm sure, if I offered them even money, would take the Lions or the Seahawks passing game. And you're just going to see their ownership elevated to where when Miami does, you're still getting really good receivers and running back in Achan. You're pairing them with a cheap quarterback. They're probably just not quite popular enough for a 2-game slate.
Yep. Are you getting into any Berrios or any tertiary options for the Miami?
I would assume not.
I would assume that also.
Yeah, no, I'm not.
And then finally, the Titans. We have Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Boyd, I think are definitely playable. Treylon Burks, I think, is borderline playable. Calvin Ridley has been kind of the team leader to this point, tied for the top in route participation at 74.4%, also leads the team with 16 targets. Tyler Boyd actually not far behind, tied in route participation, and then 14 targets on the year. He's only 4,200. And then you have Treylon Burks has so far been playing ahead of DeAndre Hopkins in terms of route participation at 46.2% with 6 targets. DeAndre Hopkins, 38.5% route participation on the year, 10 targets. And then, of course, you look at the game log here for the Titans. It's been a little bit better the past couple of weeks for DeAndre Hopkins, recovering from an offseason. I think it was a knee injury, if I'm remembering correctly. It was just 23.7% route participation in week 1, up to 45% in weeks 2 and 3. Could continue to see an expanded role, and regardless, 10 targets in those 3 games. So what is your level of interest in the Titans receivers?
Yeah, so Hopkins has run routes at a higher rate, slightly higher rate than Burks each of the last 2 weeks, and I expect that to continue. I expect that gap to grow going forward. Maybe we see a big bump today, maybe we don't. But even if he's running, 45, 50% of routes, I still think he's a solid play, and he certainly could play more. So 5,300 for Hopkins, 5,900 for Ridley. I think both those guys are going a little bit under owned, projected for like 15 to 20% ownership. I think it should actually be in like the 20 to 25% range. And so this is another one that's concerning, where I already think that Levis is going under owned at quarterback, even though he sucks. And then you're also getting, similarly to Miami, the wide receivers looking like plus plays for me too, relative to ownership. I'm very concerned about how my lineups are going to look tonight in terms of like the names in them. But it's fine. These guys are cheap. The uncertainty drives down the price and also drives down the ownership. If you going into week 5, when we know what happens tonight, you look back and you see that Hopkins ran routes 62% of the time instead of 45%. You knew that information going into tonight, he would be 35% owned at 5,300 instead of 20%. So on a 2-game slate, there is just that merit to hoping to be a game ahead of the field in getting there, hoping this is the game he steps up. And it's not like you're drawing dead. If he has the exact same role as last week, you would still be getting a bunch of targets for DeAndre Hopkins. So I like both receivers here. I think Boyd's fine as well. He's not getting much ownership at 4,200. I think he's going like wildly under owned right now. He's showing up 25 to 30% optimal rate for me. So I'm surprised he's not getting more ownership. Like, I get it because he's on the Titans, but we haven't talked about a single cheap wide receiver that we like.
Yeah. And
there weren't cheap running backs we like either. So I guess it's just everybody paying down at tight end, which is completely reasonable. But, and quarterbacks aren't expensive on this slate. So like, you probably don't need a cheap tight end or a cheap wide receiver that much, but I'm kind of surprised because like, he's just clearly the best sub 5K wide receiver, probably player on the slate.
Yeah. Me too. I feel the same way. I saw that. I was like, well, he's obviously the best like spend down option. Now, I will say, I guess I should read off the notes real quickly on the defenses here, because it is, for the most part, tough defenses that these wide receivers are facing. The Seahawks, I think I already said, have allowed the fewest fantasy points per game, DraftKings, to receivers. The Lions have actually allowed the second most, 46.9 DraftKings fantasy points per game to wide receivers, which is why the Seahawks guys all look so good to us. Titans allowing just 20.8 DraftKings fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position, third fewest in the league. The Dolphins allowing the 8th fewest in the league, 27.5. So really the only team that has a good matchup for the receivers is the Seahawks. But to me, because 3 of the teams are like in such bad matchups, it's like it kind of all evens out. Like just like, all right, they all have bad matchups. So you can kind of play it straight, not worry all that much about the matchups, because teams do well in bad matchups all the time anyway. Players do well in bad matchups all the time anyway. So not really a huge factor for me tonight, other than does make me like the Seahawks a little bit better.
I just opened my Discord and just saw like message after message of people saying how they're going to end up on the Titans Miami game. It's going to be really annoying when the slate locks and ownership is just flat across the board and we're all in the shitty
like,
of it.
Should have just played the best plays. Yeah. Well, it's probably not going to happen. It's a large enough field that, at least in the largest field contest, probably not going to even out completely. But yeah, that is obviously the worry. Could always go that way. And then any other? Oh yeah. So we, I like Hopkins quite a bit. We do have a little bit more ownership at Roto-Runners, giving Calvin Ridley 22%, so a little bit higher, and Tyler Boyd 22%. Hopkins still at 16%, so relatively low ownership. I guess Treylon Burks is the other one that is, as far as like nearly min-priced options, I think he would probably be my favorite of that group at 3.1K, just based on, I think he has the best role, 46% route participation, 6 targets. It's still pretty gross. I don't think I'm going to get there a ton.
I think I'd rather play Patrick.
That's reasonable. I think
he's going to run a higher percentage of routes, and his quarterback isn't Will Levis.
Hello, old friend El Negro Loco. Haven't seen you in a while. All right. Any other wide receivers? I think we got through all of the teams.
Yeah, that's it at wide receiver.
Okay. move on, talk through the tight ends. I don't think we need to go team by team at tight end. I think we can just go down the list here, and let me actually, I'll pull it up over here. Sam Laporta getting the most ownership, still just 25% projected ownership going to Laporta. Actually, of the Detroit guys, Sam Laporta, I think, has the best matchup. Noah Fant, 25% ownership as well. Josh Wiley getting to 17% ownership for Tennessee. Jonnu Smith, 13%. Chig, 10%. Brock Wright, 6.5%. Pharaoh Brown, 6%. I think those are all of the tight ends that I really have in my player pool at the moment, at least in my intended player pool. Who are you planning on playing the most of, Adam?
Yeah, so I like Fant the most at 3,500. He's showing up with the highest optimal rate for me. Also the most ownership, close to Laporta, but I'm a little bit ahead. But still, I think looks pretty good. Probably going a little bit under-owned, actually, given the alternatives. Laporta, obviously good if you can get there. I think he's going a little bit over-owned. I think that in general, I'm going to prefer, spending my money at running back and wide receiver. But if you can find the salary for Laporta, obviously he, from a talent standpoint, just blows everybody on the slate out of the water. And then, kind of just punting the position behind them. Jonnu Smith, Josh Wiley are the two guys also showing up like 20% of the time as far as optimal percentage. So, I've seen it mentioned a lot already where, like everybody's complaining about the ownership that's going to come into Josh Wiley, but it's backed up. It's not a player take. It's a lineup take. Like your lineups are in a lot of cases going to look better by just spending $2,500 at tight end, no matter what the guy's name is, and going elsewhere than by not. And you can, like on a 2-game slate, you can, a pretty high percentage of the time, you're just not going to need tight end points either. It's kind of, you're like a catcher in baseball on small slates. Like just save the salary. There's a good chance that like the highest scoring tight end on the slate scores 6 points or something and move on. So, there's that too. It's not, people aren't playing this guy thinking like, oh, he's going to catch a touchdown tonight. If he does, obviously it's going to be tough to beat those teams, but he doesn't need to, like, I haven't projected for between 3 and 4 DraftKings points, and he's showing up as optimal 20% of the time.
Yeah, I think this is a slate where you do have the 1-star tight end in Sam Laporta, so it's like, okay, you need these guys to outscore Sam Laporta, but also Sam Laporta has been bad all year, so it's like in theory a star tight end. I think it was a star tight end, but like the fantasy points he's actually produced so far this year wouldn't be that difficult to overcome. So not actually a huge concern there. So yeah, it's exactly. You made the exact right analogy to catchers in baseball, where it's just like, yeah, I mean, what if he gets 1 walk and it's, the best play on the slate at the catcher position? Very easy to do on a 2-game slate. Similar here. It's just like, all right, he has 2 catches for 15 yards. He could be the optimal tight end or not even, like, just because he's been priced, what he allows you to do with the rest of your lineup.
And like when you get a situation like this where Laporta is clearly the best tight end in the room, there is the case to be made for, okay, well, what if I can just like gain 20 tight end points on everybody? But then the problem with that is if Laporta is going to be 30-ish% owned, you aren't actually gaining that much on the field because 30% of the field is going to have that huge, advantage with you. So it's purely a roster construction thing, but I think he looked perfectly fine.
I think I differ from you in the sense that I think I am going to be over the field on Sam Laporta. I think I'm going to lean into that. I definitely take your point, but just because of like the matchup being pretty good, and I think just wish casting a little bit with Sam Laporta, like I still want him to be a thing. I don't know if it is the correct take, but you have him. He's actually over-owned according to your Sims.
Yeah, along with every other Lions player. So like my guess again, and this could, I don't know what ownership has. What ownership's going to look like between now and lock. I don't know what lineups I'm actually playing. My guess, just from what I'm looking at, what I ran before the show, is that Detroit is the team top to bottom that I end up lowest on.
Me too. Yep, I think I will be lowest on Detroit as well. So definitely same page there. To me, I think Sam Laporta is the one exception, just because it's been sort of a tight end funnel so far for Seattle. I think they've allowed the 8th most fantasy points to tight end. So I'm leaning into that a little bit, but I don't feel particularly great about it. It might be kind of donkish. To me, I see the projected ownership and it's like, oh, that seems pretty reasonable. Like that's a little bit light, but I also wouldn't be that surprised if Sam Laporta comes in at 45%. Like if he actually comes in significantly higher, and if he does, then I might feel kind of like an idiot for being above the field. But currently, I think I am planning on being above weight there, playing the cheaper running backs, cheap, get to some cheaper receivers, that kind of stuff. But yeah, not way over the field, but I think he's pretty solid play at least. Josh Wiley, since we were talking about, just wanted to know, Josh Wiley had his best role in week 3, 38.6% route participation, 5 targets in week 3. So I think that's part of what's appealing for Josh Wiley. Outside of those 3, so you talked about Noah Fant, projects really well for 3,500, pretty obvious play. Pharaoh Brown, that's another one somebody just brought up, I think is in play. Not like an amazing role, but let's see. I think last week was actually his first week playing for the Seahawks.
He ran like 24% of routes last week, had like a 5% target share. You absolutely can play him in place of Wiley. Like, I have Wiley projected for 1.5 more. I have Brown between like 2 and 3 and Wiley between 3 and 4. When you consider range of outcomes, those are pretty similar, and you're going to get no ownership coming into Pharaoh Brown. So I do think that's a very reasonable place to pivot, especially because, like we were just saying, comparing it to, catchers in baseball, there's a pretty decent chance that every tight end today sucks, or at least sucks relative to salary. Laporta could win by 6 points, but he's twice or 3 times as expensive. So like in that situation where every tight end sucks, let's say you get 2.5 points from Brown and the field gets 0 from Wiley, you actually have a pretty big leg up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, I think playing some Brown makes some sense to me. Tokyo Swan asked about Nick Vannett. He did score the touchdown last week. I currently don't have any plans to play Nick Vannett as the third receiver there on the Titans. I think he's in play, like for the exact reason that you're talking about with Pharaoh Brown. Josh Wiley could just go completely unowned. 4 targets on the year. 3 of them are first read targets. Does have the one in the end zone. But just to me, I might have some Nick Vannett, I guess. I don't want to completely rule it out. Probably, like, I'm not going to X him out of my player pool, but I don't think he's a big priority for me.
He's the kind of play where, like, I feel like if I were like hand building a lineup, especially years ago, I would just like click on Vannett or Brown because it's the most obvious, just like low owned pivot off of shitty chalk spot.
Yeah.
Tyreek Hill's lower owned than St. Brown, but like St. Brown's also really good and Hill's still 20% owned. Whereas here it's just like, okay, if 20% of the field's going to play the same like dart throw $2,500 guy, I'll take the 20-1 odds on somebody else. That being said, my current process now, I doubt that I get much of it, but it at least makes sense. Like, you're just hoping for an end zone target from any of these guys.
Yeah, exactly. Just like just like Showdown, just hope for the backup tight end to score the 1 touchdown, all the other tight ends to fail. That's how they get there. Brock Wright, somebody else has brought up. Yeah, 6 on the Lions, 22.6% route participation, 4th with 6 targets on the Lions. So there's a big gap between 3rd and 4th there, but 6 targets on the year for Brock Wright. 3,200, a little bit more expensive, so you actually probably need him to put up some fantasy points. But yeah, could score a touchdown, could see re-injury risk with Sam Laporta. Absolutely.
Similar route participation the first couple of weeks for Wright to guys like Vannett or Pharaoh Brown.
Yeah. Chigga Kongwo, I think I don't know if you talked about him at all, but 3rd on the Titans, 46.2% route participation, tied for 4th with 7 targets. Nothing really standing out there. Seems fine, getting a little bit of ownership. Did you have any other tight ends you wanted to talk about, Adam?
Nope, I didn't want to talk about any of them.
All right. Do you want to talk about anything else? Anything else you want to say? Defenses? Any other notes before I know you want to take off? We've already 15 minutes past when you said you'd stay on. So
no, that's fine. I just meant
you didn't want to talk about tight ends because I get it.
I mean, defense is kind of looking like I expected it to. So this actually kind of makes some sense to me, just from how the Lions look. The Lions actually are showing up as the best defense for me, which just goes hand in hand with I'm not getting I think all of their skill players are going over owned, and I think their defense is going under owned. So at least kind of makes sense logically. But no, I mean, defense is defense.
Yep. Agreed there. Any other notes before you head out, start making your lineups? I mean, you're of course welcome to stick around if you want to play around with lineups, talk Showdown and stuff, but I assume you want to go start messing with your sims.
Yeah, no, I need to go do that.
All right, cool. Well, appreciate you hanging out with me here. I'll be going for another probably half hour or so working on lineups. Adam, where can people find you the rest of the week?
The rest of the week, nowhere probably, because baseball season's over. But in general, Endgame Syndicate YouTube channel, I'll be having, I think somebody asked earlier, actually, I'll be doing daily basketball content there once the NBA season starts. I'm doing main slate football there, and then obviously this show for Showdown slates. So you can find me there. My content is at Endgame Syndicate in the link below, also at my Dub Club in the link below. So you can find it there. Kind of a little mini break for me until basketball, but in general, that's where I'll be.
Hell yeah. Go check out Adam's stuff. Check out the Endgame Syndicate YouTube channel. If you're not already signed up, sign up for the Dub Club. As Adam said, the links are all in the description of this video if you want to go check that out. All right, cool. Thanks, Adam. Good luck tonight.
See you.
All right, later. And me as well. I'm trying to get to, again, 3,000 subscribers by the end of the day is the goal. I am very short of that goal as of right now. So if any of you would subscribe to the Flannelverse YouTube channel, would appreciate it. I'm still, looks like 35 subscribers short as of right now. So would appreciate it if any of you have not already subscribed. If you would do so, would help me out quite a bit. But I'm going to continue. I will be, before we get into the showdown stuff, let me just play around with the main slate lineup, because I think it's kind of fun, and talk through kind of one of my favorite types of builds. And again, this is for large field, like the largest field GPP, not the lineup that I think is the most likely to win, but I think this type of build is going to go super low owned. I do really love the idea of doing a Tyler Huntley double stack. Again, he does a lot on the ground. Very, very possible for this type of lineup to fail in a major way. Could be catastrophic. The failure of this lineup could be last place. I don't care if it gets last place. Doesn't really hurt my feelings to have a lineup in last place. I'm trying to win first, trying to do things that are off the beaten path. So I like the idea of starting with Tyler Huntley, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle. Now here's where I said I like Sam Laporta. I'm not sure if this is actually going to be possible, but I want to try to see if I can fit this lineup with Sam Laporta in there. I think one way to do so, I think Tyjae Spears makes sense as a bring back also in this lineup. So we're going mega Miami, Tennessee. This is the lower total this game. So we're leaning into the low total here. Let's see if we can get a defense in here. Seattle, Detroit. I do like the Lions defense quite a bit, so I'll throw that in there. All right, so now I have 57-66. So this is seeming pretty possible to me. I think I also want to throw in, I put Spears in there. Maybe also throw in a Tyler Boyd because he's only 4,200. Now I have 65.50 left per player. I think just eat the chalk with, do I want to eat the chalk with Achane? Let me see what happens here. Then I have 5,900 left. Calvin Ridley fits in there. Now I think you can leave some salary on the table. So now I have 4 Miami players. Totally fine on a 2-game slate. Totally fine to fully onslaught. It's something that I like to lean into more on these 2-game slates. The full-on game stacks go a little bit under-owned on these slates. Now, a lot of ways you can leave salary and make a good lineup here. I probably would be disinclined to play Calvin Ridley in this one just because, I mean, I think it'd be fine. Probably still not going to be that duplicated, but you can play similar plays to Ridley for less money here. Leave 400 on the table, maybe with JSN. Throw D-Hop in there. Actually, I like D-Hop quite a bit on this slate. That might be my preferred way to do it. But you could also do Tyler Lockett, I think would make sense. But I think something like this, you're leaving 600 on the table, full-on game stack. Do I think this is likely to win? No, I don't think this is the best lineup if you're just trying to play the likeliest lineup to win. But this is the type of lineup that I like to do for large field GPPs. So here's an example of type of lineup that I like to do for large field GPPs. Could also get away from the Achane chalk a little bit here if you wanted to go to like, just go down to Gibbs, $300 cheaper. I think makes some sense. But a lot of fun ways to build on a slate like this. If I were playing chalk, people were asking earlier about best chalk plays, cash plays for at quarterback and running back. And I think the cash quarterback comes down to either Geno Smith or Tyler Huntley. Geno Smith is what was showing up for me running the optimal lineups various places. But Tyler Huntley, as Adam said, was actually showing up in the optimal in the Sims. So I think either of them is a pretty strong play here. I would probably, I'm gonna start with Geno here. Feels a little bit safer to me, even with Huntley's rushing floor. At running back, I think you just got to go to Achane immediately. I think he's going to be super highly owned. I think I would be inclined to go to Tony Pollard in a cash game also at 6,000. Just has a really, really nice workload. He's only 6,000. Great matchup. I think probably JSN makes it into a cash game lineup for me. Pretty solid target share so far this year. I don't love that he has 2 games with a total of 5 targets on the year, just as the 1 game where he's actually been targeted a lot. But I think JSN in a nice matchup with Detroit at 5,500 probably makes sense in a cash game setting. I think at tight end, you probably want to completely punt at in cash. So it would be, let's see. Actually, maybe not. Maybe it would be Noah Fant, just based on the projection here, being kind of a drop off after Fant. Jonnu, yeah, probably Fant would be make it into my cash game lineup. Defense, I think, would be the Lions here in cash. 6,300 left per player. Now, who would be? I guess you look at the projections here, or the point per dollar projections. Wide receiver, interesting. Tyreek Hill up there in point per dollar projections. Tyler Lockett potentially. Kind of feels like he'd be pretty good. He didn't really have the big role early on. Hopkins, I don't think is cashy enough. I think Tyler Boyd might actually kind of want to see. I don't play as much cash. Don't usually play cash on a 2-game slate, so I don't even know why I'm trying to make a cash lineup, but just trying to kind of go through who I think are the objectively the best plays on the slate, I guess, without trying to factor in ownership all that much. I think Amon-Ra would have to go in there. Maybe something like that would probably be my cash game lineup. I don't know. It's a tough one. This would be fine in GPP. You've got the double stack with Geno, JSN, Noah Fant. You are playing against the Lions defense, which again in a GPP on a 2-game slate, I think is totally fine. You're mostly leaning into the game with the high total. You're just getting Tony Pollard in there in a great matchup. Achane the chalk in the worst game, and then buying some salary relief with Tyler Boyd. So I think this is actually a lineup that could potentially work in a large field GPP, and also would make sense in cash probably. You know what? I'm going to enter this one. All right. Let's talk some Showdown for a little bit. Let me, if you have any questions, I can be happy to take any. What about, we talked about Wiley for a bit. He's very much in play. He is going to be getting some ownership. I think the ownership is probably warranted. Seems like a pretty strong play on this slate. Pass attempts for Huntley over under 25.5. I'd probably take the under. If I were just doing a pick 'em with it. I hope it's over because I'm playing a lot of him, but I would probably bet on the under there. How do you play a super flex lineup? I no idea how I would play a super flex lineup. Probably still stack. You'd probably still want to do stacking stuff. Play a quarterback with his receivers, a lot of the usual stuff, stack the game, etc. Titans defense scoring, book it. Yeah, I think somebody was asking earlier about the Titans defense. Absolutely, I think the Titans defense very much in play. Going against Tyler Huntley, not exactly an elite quarterback. At least we don't think of him as an elite quarterback. I shouldn't even say that. He's not an elite quarterback. So I think playing the Titans defense against this Miami team with Tyler Huntley at quarterback. Usually my defensive decisions on most slates kind of come down to targeting the quarterback more than anything else, more than the strength of the defense. I also think the Titans have just a really good defense. I think it's an actual elite defense. So totally fine playing the Titans defense on this one. All right. This is funny on Showdown. Nobody wants to play kickers, and they have been awesome all year. You can absolutely play kickers on Showdown. Let's play around with Showdown just a little bit. So let me just pull up the numbers here, and we'll go pretty quickly through the Showdown slates. Let's see. I'm still not that great at navigating the optimizers. It takes me a minute here. Okay, here we go. We'll start with the Tennessee Miami Showdown, since that is first. Let's reload. So let's take a look at the captain ownership first. HN getting a lot of captain ownership, as he probably should. Really strong play. Tennessee has been a little bit weaker against the run than against the pass. Actually significantly weaker against the run than against the pass. So HN's ownership, I think, is reasonable. I think 23% in the captain, probably pretty fair there. Will Levis getting 10% seems fine. Huntley also getting around 10%. So we're not getting those like 5% owned quarterbacks in the captain spot that I truly love, but I think both fine ownership there. As far as stacking goes, actually, I think Will Levis, and I lost my camera, looks like. Let me see what Will Levis has actually done on the ground. I think he is somebody that I would want to at least stack in every lineup. Usually I would have looked this up by now, but usually I kind of know anyway, but Will Levis is one that I think of him as having some rushing upside, but I'm not sure if that has actually come to fruition. Let's see. Averaging, he has 86 yards on the season, averaging just 29 rush yards per game. That's actually not that bad. 29 rush yards per game, not bad at all. Last year, Will Levis just 6 rush yards per game, so not really showing that much as a rusher. Yeah, I would probably always stack Will Levis. I would double stack him if I have him in the captain spot. Snoop Huntley, absolutely, you can play unstacked. I think he's has shown a much higher floor, rushing floor than Will Levis, or ceiling obviously as well. I think you can play Tyler Huntley without any stacking partners. Typically, if I have him in the captain spot, would still prefer to have a pass catcher in the flex. If I have Tyler Huntley in the captain spot, even with his rushing floor, if he does enough, I guess if he scores a touchdown and runs for 60 yards, he could get there without bringing along any pass catchers, particularly because Tyreek Hill is so expensive. So if he's the pass catcher who scores a touchdown and doesn't do that much else, it could happen. But generally, I would still prefer to have at least one pass catcher with when I have, I guess I'll bring this down here, when I have Huntley in the captain spot, but totally reasonable to play him in the flex without any pass catchers. Where was I? Okay. Tyreek Hill, I love this captain ownership, 8% projected ownership on Tyreek Hill in the captain spot. I would lean into that. I think that's a great number for Tyreek Hill. So that would be probably the one spot that I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be well above the field there. I like that better than either of the quarterbacks. Sign me up for Tyreek Hill at 8% captain ownership. That is a great play, in my opinion. 5% Ridley feels fine. No real take there. This is different than last night. Last night I said, I'd probably limit my captain ownership to like the top 6 players, the running backs, the quarterbacks, the top receiver on each team. This one, I think you can I think Calvin Ridley makes sense. Jalen Waddle makes sense. DeAndre Hopkins makes sense. Maybe even Tyler Boyd to save some salary. I think this would be one where I spread out my exposure at captain significantly more than I did last night. But I think some of my favorites, like clearly Tyreek Hill, as I said. Where is the Tony Pollard ownership? Okay, Tony Pollard up at 10%. Seems good to me. Doesn't seem like I might be I think I'd be a little bit overweight to the field on 10% Tony Pollard. So I think the places that I would be underweight to the field is probably eliminating. I probably wouldn't have any of Tyjae Spears, Jonnu Smith, Chig, Wiley. Like I wouldn't get to the super cheap guys. I'm hesitant to say that I would cut out the kickers or defenses, because I think this is a game where kickers or defenses might be what you want at captain. So yeah, let me think who else I might cut down on the ownership to allow myself to get higher on guys like Tyreek Hill. Honestly, it actually might be the quarterbacks, particularly Will Levis. I think I would probably be a little bit light there. Just doesn't do enough on the ground. Tough matchup. So I'd probably cut down my Will Levis exposure to get to more Tyreek Hill. Maybe even Achane, maybe cap it at 20% to push up guys like Tyreek Hill. But yeah, I think the biggest stance for me would be Tyreek Hill, leaning into that. But I think generally it's going to be pretty flat exposure for me at captain on this one. Not a lot of no real separation there. I think you could very easily see like the defense being the optimal captain or kicker being the optimal captain, because this could be a gross low scoring game. At flex, we have, again, 50% ownership going to Devin Achane. Seems fine to me. 46% going to Tyler Huntley. I like that number quite a bit. So we're getting only 66% total ownership. 56% total ownership going to Tyler Huntley. Probably come in a little bit higher than that. Not too much, but I would guess I'm over 60% at least total exposure going to Tyler Huntley. Really like the Tony Pollard exposure, 45% total ownership going to Tony Pollard. I would lean into that. Tyreek Hill, I like this number too. It's 34% in the flex. I think that would be just one of my bigger stands on this showdown slate in general, would be Tyreek Hill being overweight across the board, particularly a captain, but also in the flex spot. Ridley, 29% seems fine. Waddle, 24% seems fine. Tajay, guessing I'd be a little bit light on 23% Tajay here. Lean into, Tony Pollard a little bit more. Where was DeAndre Hopkins? Yeah, 24.5%. I think I like him better on the 2-game slate, but I would still probably play him on this one, 24.5. Probably about even with the field. That's a high enough price tag that I don't, the ownership and the price tag are similar enough to Calvin Ridley that I think, I like D-Hop better on the 2-game slate, but they're close enough here that I would just lean into Ridley having the better usage so far this year. I'd probably just play more there and keep D-Hop right around where the field is playing. That would not be a big stand for me. So again, I think the biggest stand for me would be probably Tyreek Hill overall. Let me see. Let me try playing with some lineups. I do like the defenses also. We talked about the Titans on the 2-game slate being a pretty strong play. Really, strong play here too. Only 4,000, 20%, 21% ownership. Totally fair on the Titans. Yeah, I like that. I would lean into the defenses probably on the showdown slate. It's sort of counterintuitive. I really played Miami on the 2-game slate. Sorry, on the showdown slate. I think the defenses are really strong options here because they're not going to get a crazy amount of ownership. The Dolphins then we have at 25%. I don't even have an issue with that. The Dolphins defense has been pretty awesome so far this year, better against the pass. Certainly Will Levis can throw the ball over, turn the ball over. So yeah, I would lean into the defenses on this slate, probably more so in the flex than in the captain spot, but wouldn't even write them off at captain. Let's go build some lineups for showdown. Is this the first one? This is hour and 37. I think this is the second one. Yeah. All right. So here's the first showdown slate. We'll do this one and then I'll talk about the second showdown slate also. So again, I would lead into Tyreek Hill in the captain spot. I just think the field is playing it later than they should, given how good Tyreek Hill is. You could play Wiley. I think he's a fine play here. Tyler Boyd, 5,400 seems fine. I really do like these defenses, so I think I would. Let's see what we can do if we start with both defenses. I like Huntley also. Let's throw him in there, correlation with Hill. So now we have Huntley and Hill with the. I put Chig in there by accident. I meant to put the Titans in there. With the Titans defense in there. I do really like Tony Pollard. Ooh. I did not realize Tony Pollard only 600 cheaper than Devin Achane. That's a tough ask. So I'm going to go with Devin Achane in this one. You could, that is a spot where you could go to Tony Pollard to get a little bit different. I didn't even notice that when I was looking at it before. That is sort of nuts seeing Achane just 600 more than Pollard there. Now we have 5,100 left over. Could go to a kicker, but I don't want to use the full salary cap. I'd rather leave a little bit on the table. So this is where you could go to Chig, you could go to Jonnu, Wiley, Burks. Nobody really standing out to me. Let's go with Jonnu. So now we have Huntley. We have a full onslaught against the Titans defense. We have Hill, Dolphins defense, Huntley, Achane, Jonnu Smith, and then just the Titans defense. So maybe the Titans defense has a couple takeaways, but the offense just sucks. The Dolphins defense, maybe scored the touchdown or has a few takeaways, also just completely shuts down the Tennessee defense. Tyreek Hill, gets to the 100-yard bonus and a touchdown. He's the captain you need. But Achane still involved enough, gets the PPR points, gets enough yardage. Jonnu Smith doesn't need to do all that much. think this is a fine lineup. I'm not in love with this lineup, if I'm being honest, but I think that this is a fine large field GPP lineup. You can see it winning, and it's not going to be duped at all. Those are the kind of lineups I like to build. All right, let's see. Getting back to Chak real quick. Yeah, let me look at Larry asks, is Achane the chalk at captain? I feel like how did I miss that Tony Pollard is 10,000? So yeah, this ownership at 10,000 actually feels, I don't know, almost a little bit much. Maybe still fine. At captain, we do have Achane is the Achane is the chalk at captain, projected for 23% ownership. So not really insane chalk. I think that's totally fine. But yeah, that's that price difference between Pollard and Achane doesn't seem as big as it should be. What's up, Phil? Glad that you found the channel. Good to see you here. All right, good to see a lot of familiar friends in chat. Good, thank you all for coming, hanging out with me while I'm breaking down this 2-game slate and now the showdown slate. Sans, Adam. Let's see. Do I have any other notes on? Maybe let me build one more lineup here. So yeah, I think this is fine. I don't totally love it. What if we did I said if you have Huntley in the captain spot, you don't need to stack him. I would still be inclined to do it. And I think that would be kind of a unique way to build where I don't think a lot of people are going to force it. So let's do similar to the main slate. Just what if we tried Huntley with Hill and with Jalen Waddle? Can we make this work with the onslaught? I do like DeAndre Hopkins a bit. So now we're getting low in terms of salary we have left. So now we've got the double stack. Could throw Jonnu in there. I don't think I'm going to. Can't even afford Jalen Waddle in this one. But maybe now we go to. Now again, we could go. This is a way to get. I mean, it's probably unique enough just having Tyler Huntley in the captain with Hill and Waddle. But I think you throw in the Titans defense and suddenly, yeah, not many people are going to be playing the Huntley captain stack with the Titans defense. More so now than a couple of years ago, because we do have enough people just using optimizers or using sims that are going to give them that type of lineup. So unfortunately, it's not going to be super contrarian anymore. But I think that it's probably still, not many people hand building are going to build with the Miami stack and the Titans defense in there. And again, the Titans defense, they get a pick six. Suddenly they have a big score that you want to have. And Tyler Huntley gets the ball right back in a spot where more likely to be passing because the team is, maybe down at this point. That might not be the case with Tyler Huntley. Like some quarterbacks, if Patrick Mahomes throws a pick six, definitely they're going to lean into the pass more. Going to be more likely to pass it because it's more likely going to be a close game, or they're going to be playing from behind. Maybe that's not the case with a guy like Tyler Huntley, because maybe if he throws a pick six, the team just says, all right, we're just running from here on out. So maybe it's not the quite the same equation here with a quarterback who's not as trusted with the coaches. Maybe you don't love the Titans defense against the quarterback quite as much, but still I think playable. Let's just switch that out. Let's see what if we go to the Dolphins defense instead. I built 2 lineups now, and both of them are let's assume that the Titans just get shut out. So maybe that's the way the field will play too. But maybe throw Chig in there, leaving 1,400 on the table. I think this would be an unduped lineup that you can clearly see winning. You're only leaving 1,400 on the table. So what do you need? I mean, Jalen Waddle, you can't even get up from Jalen Waddle to Tony Pollard or Devin Achane. You need Jalen Waddle in this case to outscore Will Levis, which, we're betting against the Tennessee offense in general. So I think that's fine. 1,400, you can get up from DeAndre Hopkins to what's 8,800. Calvin Ridley, I guess you get up from Hopkins to Ridley. Yeah, wouldn't be shocking at all if Hopkins outscores Ridley. I don't see any reason this lineup can't win. You need the Dolphins to outscore Tyler Boyd. Certainly they can outscore Tyler Boyd. Yeah, I think this is a totally fine large field GPP lineup that is probably going to go not very duped. So maybe we can move on, look at the other one. See, do you have anybody have any questions? Anything else we want to talk about here? V-neck without the chest hair sticking out. I mean, it's just the camera. I don't have my high def camera on. It broke. It stopped working. So I'm just using my computer camera now. I'm sorry that you can't see my chest hair as in focus as usual. I don't usually have to do anything to make it stick out. It just does it on its own. Let's see. Who scores more DK points, Huntley or Smith? I mean, if it's just a like 1-to-1, like you're making a bet with somebody, even odds, I'd probably put the money on Geno Smith. I assume that is where the projections are. Let me see. Where do we have the projections on the quarterbacks? Pull it up here because it's easier. Geno Smith projects for 4 more fantasy points than Tyler Huntley. So yeah, if you're just like making a bet, I would make the bet on Geno Smith, even though that's not really what I'm doing on this slate. I'm making the bet on Tyler Huntley. If you're just making a straight up bet, 50-50, you're making, yeah, I'd take Geno Smith at even odds. Yes, let's do a Hopkins at captain lineup. I like that. It's a good idea. It's going to be contrarian. Not many people will have that. All right, so we're going Hopkins at captain. So now this one, you don't necessarily need to go to Will Levis. Sometimes I like to not play it that way, but in this one, I'll just go to Will Levis at captain. Now I think because we're playing contrarian Hopkins, you can just kind of eat the chalk a little bit on Achane. This is a slate where the pricing doesn't make it like super easy to build. Tyjae Spears at 5,800 relative to the 10,000. Pollard at least looks pretty good. The cheap options on the slate are not options that I really love. Let's go with Wiley. I think he's going to get some ownership here, but we're doing kind of a Tennessee succeeds more type of lineup. Haven't used him yet. I think he's a fine play, even getting some ownership here. Now we can maybe we do, if we let's not do Huntley in this one. Let's do Titans defense. Assume that Huntley does not do all that well, and then throw Tyreek Hill in there. You can still get there. Even if Huntley's not doing well, Tyreek Hill can rack up PPR points. The yardage is more, etc., etc. So now we're leaving 1,700 on the table. We have Will Levis stacked with DeAndre Hopkins and Wiley. So just two, which, if I have Hopkins in the captain spot, probably don't want, I would prefer not to have more than one other pass catcher in the lineup because you really want it to be pretty concentrated to DeAndre Hopkins. So I think having the inexpensive Wiley as the only other pass catcher, I like that in this lineup. You've got the stack with Will Levis going to DeAndre Hopkins. You've got the stars, the chalk with Achane and Tyreek Hill, both just get enough usage that you love them. And then Titans defense kind of making a bet against the Dolphins scoring a lot, at least maybe stopping Huntley from scoring many touchdowns. So I think this is a good large field GPP lineup. Obviously not the likeliest to hit, but it's going to be unduped, and you can clearly make a case. You can see this lineup succeeding. So I like this for a large field GPP. Okay. Let's look at the other game, the other showdown slate real quick, and then get to making some lineups. And then I'm going to sign off here and go make lineups on my own. Wait, Peter Porker, what was the question? DK 2-game Metcalf or Gibbs for my last spot? Also, would you play Pollard over Spears? Yeah, I do like I'm going to be playing some of both of them, but in a vacuum, I think Pollard just has the much better workload. So I would prefer, generally, I'm going to have more Pollard than Spears. He would be my preference generally. Okay. Love to see it, Mitchell. Almost came back anyway. Hated to see the Packers almost come back in that game. T Mickey thinks Eskridge is the play. I mean, Eskridge is not going to get any ownership at least. So I guess he has that going for him. With the content in particular, I'm limited in how many I'm going to do. I think I'm playing 60 on the main slate and 40 on each showdown, maybe something like that. But I really put myself in a tough spot last week going over on this show where I didn't give myself nearly enough time. Didn't make the lineups that I liked at all last week. So learned my lesson. Not going to go overboard with the number of lineups, but still probably more than I should be playing when I'm doing content so late. Okay, let's take a look at the other slate. So the second game is Seattle at Detroit. Take a look at the captain ownership first. So really, we don't have much chalk. So, looks like the field is kind of similar to me in the amount that we're just kind of playing it flat at captain. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 16% seems very reasonable to me. Geno Smith, 11.5%. Jahmyr Gibbs at just 10% projected ownership. I kind of like that. Lockett at 9%. Goff at 7%. That does stand out to me as a pretty good number for Goff. So I think I would lean into Goff at captain a little bit, even against a tough Seattle defense. Walker at 7%. Probably has a very strong role, but again, really tough against this Detroit defense. I think Jameson Williams, we know he has that big splash play potential. I think he's a pretty strong bet at 6.5% projected ownership. Love JSN at 6%. So I would probably, DK Metcalf 6%. So yeah, I would probably lean into these under-owned Seattle pass catchers, JSN and DK Metcalf in particular. Tyler Lockett getting a little bit more ownership at captain, I think, because of the price savings there. I would probably, I think Tyler Lockett fine. I might be close to the field, maybe a little bit underweight to the field on Lockett, but I think I would probably be at least 10% each on JSN and DK Metcalf. I think I might even set a rule. Probably won't set the rule, but that'll be kind of my goal. At least 10% each on Metcalf and JSN. If I were hand building, I would consider going to DK Metcalf as my captain here. I think that's really strong. Sam Laporta, I actually really like that 3.5% projected ownership at captain. I think this could be a nice game for Laporta. Hasn't really shown it yet this week. The coaches said last week this is going to be a Laporta week, and then it was not. But I think at some point Laporta is going to have those blow-up games. So I like that. I don't know that I want to go to Noah Fant, I think, is playable at captain. 2% owned. I do think that's playable. Yeah, not going super cheap captain. Defense's kicker is fine. I'm not a huge stand there. I'll include them in my player pool if they get in there. If the optimizer gives them to me, I'll take them. But I think DK Metcalf, probably my favorite captain, DK Metcalf on this slate. As far as flex goes, we have Amon-Ra St. Brown at 44%, Geno Smith at 44%. Both those numbers seem totally reasonable to me. Jared Goff, 38%. Jahmyr Gibbs, 35.5%. I like this number. JSN, 31%. Tyler Lockett, 31%. $1,000 difference in price there. Interesting. Probably come in underweight to 29% Kenneth Walker just because the matchup is so tough for him. But doesn't seem that unreasonable, but I would probably, limit my Kenneth Walker a little bit. Maybe I play 20% just so I can lean into the plays that I really like. And again, DK Metcalf, 29% projected ownership in the flex seems really good to me. Jameson Williams, he's only 6,800, which seems like a good enough price tag that I would probably get above 29%. I do like Montgomery. He's one of those like boring plays. Nobody ever wants to play David Montgomery. I probably come in overweight to 26% Montgomery. So I need to think about who I would cut, who I would be underweight to here. Also really like Sam Laporta. So I think the players that I cut down on a little bit, $8,000 Zach Charbonnet just seems too much to me. I would probably cut out maybe all of it. I might get to 0% of $8,000 Zach Charbonnet. Obviously, you can see the case for it. Maybe he is just more involved. Maybe Kenneth Walker re-aggravates the injury in the first quarter. But at 8,000 in the worst possible matchup, I think I just cut Zach Charbonnet out. And if he beats me, he beats me. I can accept that. So yeah, I think I'd be light on Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker. Actually, probably a little bit. I wouldn't completely cut out Kenneth Walker, but I'd be lighter than 29%. Probably cut out Charbs completely and then lean into Laporta, Montgomery, Metcalf. Get higher on those three in particular. Nobody else really standing out to me as somebody I want to be significantly over or underweight on in the flex spot. All right, let me check questions. I'll make a couple builds here. Let's see. No. Sam Darnold is for real. I'm with Nick. That's our guy. Winning games, 4-0, Skol. All right, let's see. I don't know. I really don't play Showdown Cash. It's really hard for me to think about, but probably fine if you can get the rest of your lineup being one that you really like. I think you could. Two-game Metcalf or Gibbs. Yeah, I think I like Metcalf over Gibbs. and Spears, Pollard over Spears. All right, let's see. Amon-Ra or Hill. Depends on the rest of your lineup. So if the rest of your lineup is like playing a lot of the chalk, I would play Tyreek Hill. I like Tyreek Hill quite a bit. Amon-Ra projects better. He has better volume, much safer, but has a tough matchup. They both have tough matchups. I'm probably going to end up with more Amon-Ra than Hill, I would guess, but not that much more, whereas there's a big gap in the field. So to me, it's going to be, I'm kind of going to even out my exposure, where I'm not going to be that much higher on Amon-Ra than Tyreek, whereas the field is going to be way higher on Amon-Ra than Tyreek. But yeah, it really comes down to the lineup that you've built. If it is mostly chalk, then I would play Tyreek Hill in that lineup. But if it is, you're already getting different, playing like a Titan stack or something, then I would go to Tyreek Hill. All right, let me try building a showdown lineup here. Or like if you're talking about like season long, I would just play Amon-Ra over Tyreek Hill, much safer. All right, so for the later showdown slate, I said I like DK Metcalf best at captain. Let's see what we can do with that. All right, Metcalf, let's go. Again, don't have to do this, but I'm going to go with Geno in this one. I like Laporta quite a bit, so we're down to 59.66 left per player. Where can we get cheap? Now, Fant, if I go to Fant, then maybe I don't want to go to many other Seattle pass catchers. Again, pretty tough with the value options here. Nobody that I super love. Tim Patrick, I think maybe in play on a showdown slate. Didn't talk about him a ton on the 2-gamer, but I think he's at least in play here. Who would I rather play? I mean, this is another way. You go Lions defense, you save salary. You're going to get a little bit more unique by playing the Lions defense against the Geno and Metcalf stack. I think they actually have a pretty good... The defense has not been that good so far this year, but I think they're probably better than they have been. Could go to UFL legend Jake Bates. Let's do that. Let's go to Jake Bates. Maybe Seattle's just not getting into the end zone that much. What can we do if we put Montgomery, or Gibbs is only $1,000 more than Montgomery. So now we'd have 3,500 left over. So now we have 2 Seattle, 3 Detroit. Not loving this lineup. All right, Fant could be the other. See, now this is going to be too chalky, I would think. I like the lineup, if not for the fact that I think it's going to be duped. Geno paired with DK Metcalf, Fant, the only other Seattle pass catcher in this one. You've got Laporta and Montgomery with Jake Bates. I think this is a pretty strong lineup, except for I would expect it to be duped quite a bit. So I think this is, if you don't care about dupes, I think this is a pretty strong lineup to consider. If you're trying to avoid dupes, let's see, could we get away from Bates? Can we leave a little bit more salary if we go away from Bates and go to Lions defense, leaving 900 on the table, maybe better for a large field GPP. You're pulling the trigger of Lions against Geno Smith and DK Metcalf. You're leaving more salary on the table. So this is probably a little bit better from an EV standpoint for a large field GPP, I would think. You're $100 short of being able to upgrade from Dave Montgomery to Jahmyr Gibbs. I love that you can't quite get there to Gibbs. You could get to Goff, but we're playing it as though Seattle fails. You do have Laporta in there. You could add another stack in there, but I think Dave Montgomery very live to outscore Goff anyway. So this is to me a pretty strong large field GPP lineup. All right, let me see if we have any of the questions. Maybe build one more here. But you want to see DK 2-gamer, would you play Waddle and Hill together or Metcalf and JSN for attorney? Who do you have at quarterback? I would play them together for sure if you have the quarterback. I think that's going to go a little bit under owned, so certainly you can try that out. But yeah, I think I would be less inclined to play Waddle and Hill together without Huntley. I think you could. I think it's not something I'm going to set a rule against, but if I'm hand building, I probably avoid that. All right, Sean, I'll do this one. You say you want to try JSN at captain. So let's build that one. What's the price tag? JSN at captain. Then let's go with Gibbs in this one. Lockett pretty inexpensive, so I do think Lockett a pretty strong play. Now I probably don't want to go to any other Seattle pass catchers. Could go to, I mean, JSN cheap enough that if he allows you to get, DK in there, probably fine. Could actually go. This is one where you could go Gibbs and Montgomery. Not many people are going to play them together. They're both pretty expensive, so people probably disinclined to play them together. I think they're totally fine to play in Showdown in the same lineup. So that is one that I would consider here. What if I throw a Monra in here? And then, so we have 68.50 left per player. Could go to Laporta, could go to JMO. What if I put Laporta in there? I have 6,500 left. Now you've got Jason Myers in there. So maybe Lockett and Smith and Lockett and JSN get there largely as PPR scams in a low-scoring game. Maybe JSN scores the, one touchdown for Seattle or both touchdowns for Seattle, whatever. But Geno doesn't throw more than, 200 yards and a touchdown or two. Gets outscored by all of JSN, Gibbs, Lockett. Not Lockett, doesn't even need to be Lockett because he's too expensive, but gets outscored by Gibbs, Amon-Ra. I think that is totally reasonable. And maybe they get stopped in the red zone a lot, so they don't get the touchdowns. Myers gets the field goals instead of touchdowns. I think that you can obviously make the case for this lineup. I don't see any issue with the 1,500 we have left over. Is there anybody that, can't outscore the players up to 1,500 more of them? I could clearly see Sam Laporta outscoring both of the Seattle backs as well as David Montgomery. You need him to for this to be optimal, but I think it's reasonable to think Sam Laporta could outscore these three running backs. If you disagree, then I wouldn't play this lineup. Amon-Ra St. Brown is expensive. You can see him outscoring everybody. Lockett, can he outscore everybody up to 7,100? Yeah, you need Lockett to outscore Jameson Williams here. I think Lockett's probably going to outscore Jameson Williams 40% of the time. I think that's totally reasonable. You need Gibbs to outscore Metcalf. Yeah, I think this is a good large field GPP lineup with JSN at captain. Pulls enough levers that it's not going to be duped a lot. So I like that. Realizing I lost my camera again. All right, let's see. Any other questions before we head out, start making some lineups on my own, get the opto going? Let's see. I hope we don't get any blowout games. I want to see competitive games. Yesterday was embarrassing. I just turned off my TV and went to bed. Yeah, I would like some competitive games. Always more fun that way. Mostly I want to make money. So that's the biggest thing I care about, is just making money, but it would be fun to have some competitive games. Yeah, the Vikings are always entertaining. I agree with you there, Nick. Let's see. Yeah, the Thursday night games, I don't know. It's tough because I love Showdown, but also there's so many injuries, often a poor product. I agree with you there. All right, let's do it. I need to go make some lineups. If you haven't already subscribed, would appreciate you subscribing to the Flannelverse. Also, Endgame Syndicate. The link is in the description if you're in the Flannelverse right now. Link to Adam's channel, the Endgame Syndicate. Highly recommend it. A lot of great content there as well. Check out Adam's Dub Club if you haven't already. He does a lot of hard work, good content over there. We're going to be back on Monday morning. Adam and I back to our regularly scheduled programming. We will do the Monday morning show. I'll do the evening show on Monday. So again, if you haven't subscribed, would appreciate the subscriptions. Trying to get to 2,000 subs by the end of the day. I don't think that we're going to get there today. Let me just refresh. I'm up to 29.95. So I need 5 more people to subscribe to get to 3,000 by the end of the day. Again, would really appreciate it. Just trying to hit a new goal before I can set my sights on the 5,000 by the end of the season goal. Yeah, appreciate any of you, all of your support. really appreciate you hanging out with me. So yeah, like, subscribe, comment, all of that is very helpful. Appreciate you all. I am going to go make some lineups. Good luck tonight.